Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Howdie Mickoski. First, a couple of announcements. The first episode of the Forbidden documentary is still on schedule for early next month. I'm in no way finished. This is just episode 1 of many to come. We still have plenty of costs to cover and tons of work to do, and we can still use your help. If you'd like to help with the donation, you can go to supportfkn.com, or we have links in the description. Right now, if you make a donation of $5 or more, you will be able to download the first episode for free. So go ahead, click that link. Anything is greatly appreciated, guys. And you can now get Forbidden Knowledge News live 5 days a week on Rokfin, Rumble, and our website. That website is forbiddenknowledge.news. It's the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. That is also where we feature some of your favorite podcasts. You can always get every new episode of Forbidden Knowledge News on Rokfin, Rumble, Odyssey, and all podcast platforms. Sign up on Rokfin because that is where you get our premium content. You also get all the premium content for every creator on Rokfin. Just go to rokfin.com/FKN+, or use the link in the description to sign up now. Today I want to welcome back to the show Howdie Mickoski. He is a renegade historian, author, and deeply spiritual questioner of reality. Howdie, welcome back. How you doing?
I am actually doing fine. A little bit of the lovely allergy season, but beyond that, yeah, staying sane in an insane world. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, and that's a feat in and itself, and thank you so much for coming back on. I've been looking forward to this. Last time we had an amazing discussion, and today we will have another. We're going to be discussing some of the mysteries surrounding the World's Fairs, the strange time frame they're associated with, and the possibility that they could have been remnants of a civilization that was coexisting with ancient Rome and Greece, and lots to get into today. But before we do, remind the audience about yourself and what brought you to this particular research.
Yeah, quick story. I'd had sort of a semi-normal life, but not exactly normal. Made it through some trauma. In the midst of a depression, wound up moving into the study of ancient Egypt. So I studied ancient Egypt and the ancient world for about 8 to 10 years. Had a near-death experience in 2005. Had a major shift of things from that experience, changed how I viewed just about everything, and didn't it brought in a lot of clarity and a lot of confusion. And as the confusion period ended after about 10 years, I was in Florence, studying cathedrals actually, and how the cathedrals were energy machines, and nothing to do with religion. And in the course of that, when I got back from Florence, this was like, yeah, February 2019, I bumped into the Chicago World's Fair just in the course of looking at buildings and architecture, and I couldn't believe what I was looking at. That how have I never heard about this? Was the first thing. How have I never heard about this exposition? And then found out there were hundreds of them all over the world, just like this, right? 700, 1,000 acres of buildings, supposedly put up in record times, have an exposition, and then bring in dynamite and blow them up. Everything about the story right away indicated to me this is a book that needs to be written. And so, yeah, like March to 2019, I started it. I got it out before Christmas 2019. And when I look back now at that work, because I talked a lot about resets in that book, I talked a lot about that these fairs were like, because at that time, the alternative history community was using this term reset as sort of like a wiping out of civilization and a restarting of it. And within 4 or 5 months, as we got into our insanity, the word reset became everywhere in our television. And I'm like, I think I jumped the gun with what's going on. So now I think the book has even more importance as to where we are currently.
Yeah, 100%. Now, you said that there were hundreds of these world fairs across the planet going
Right.
on around the same time period,
Yeah.
roughly?
Yeah. The book itself focuses on the World's Fairs from 1851, which is supposed to be the first one at the Crystal Palace in London, and it ends in 1915 with the last one that was going on during World War I in San Francisco. World fairs continued after the First World War. I mean, they had one, like a weird one, a couple of years ago in Dubai. So they've gone on since. But this period up to 1915 was very specific in the way the buildings looked, the way the fairs were structured, the type of things that they showed. So it's like after that one in 1915, they changed completely. But in that, say, 70-year time period, there were, yeah, there would be 200 or 300 equivalent of what could be called world expositions, everywhere from South America to the Philippines to Cambodia to all through Europe, the United States, just everywhere in the world. And in each case, they looked the same, they presented the same thing, and then they were all basically blown up.
Hmm.
So it's the weirdest thing when you start trying to understand what were they doing and why were they doing this? And that's the research got really wild because most people, I didn't realize this either. I never, I got a degree in history, right? Actually went through a university with a history degree, even took American history in the late 1800s. So I took a third year history course in the specific time period. These fairs were never mentioned, right? I'd never heard of them before. And when I actually started researching it, I found out that each one of the fairs, so for example, there was in just in the United States, you had one in Philadelphia in '76, you had one in Nashville, you had one in Omaha, you had one in Portland, you had one in Chicago, you had one in St. Louis, you had one in Seattle. Each one would have a historian of the day write a book about the fair. Now, they're not just a book; these books are 5,000 to 8,000 pages long. They're just massive tomes, not just of trying to explain the history of the city, the history of the world, the history of this fair, but everything that was, I mean, literally every single thing, every exhibit, every piece of artwork, every restaurant, it's all listed in these. So once I realized I have this massive amount of information that you could also dig into. And I hope that the book that came out is getting a little taste of what's actually at these fairs, how crazy they were, how insane they were, and the realization that if anybody's really interested, you've got tens of thousands of pages of research still just sitting on the internet that you can go dig through yourself if you really want to go further, because it's like I could have studied this for 15 years and still keep going.
Now, what particular fairs did you focus on, if any, and what were some of the similarities and features that these particular fairs had?
I took sort of about 4 or 5 major ones, and I took ones from the United States for the book, mostly because then the story of if there's a bunch of big buildings in Milan in 1840, someone could say, well, Milan has a long history. They built these cathedrals in 1000 AD, so it makes sense. There's big buildings there, but like Omaha, Nebraska in 1898 is not supposed to have giant towers and domes and structures. Those things are not supposed to be there. So the story made it more clear to dig into. Of there's supposed to be nothing in this location. They decide to have this fair in 6 months to a year. They design and build all the stuff, and so that's why I chose
what was the
American
mainstream narrative behind the world fairs, the reason they were put forward, and who was behind it? Was it the government? Was it some sort of aristocratic groups? Who was behind this, and what was the mainstream reason for it?
Yeah, the mainstream reason you would say was you might call it like a combination of an Olympics of showing off. That's a really good way of sort of comparing it to holding an Olympics somewhere and just going overboard. But what was there was, and we will talk about this later, as I think what was really going on, but it was displaying particularly technology, science, history, what we might call ethnological history. Human zoos is basically what was there to show the evolution of the human species to the perfection that was now in the 1880s, 1890s. You've got that's kind of the reason they're saying they're putting it on. Now, who's putting it on are the very rich. So, for example, all of the big robber barons, like the steel barons, the bank owners, the true millionaires of the period of time, which would be like a billionaire today. They're the ones who are pumping in all the money. The bizarre thing is every single one of these fairs loses a lot of money. I think the one in Philadelphia in 1876, I think it loses $4 million. So I don't know. That's like what, 400 million or 800 million today or something crazy, you know? And one of the things about rich people is the reason they stay rich is because they don't lose money. If they get into something and they lose money, they realize we're going to stop doing that. We'll do something else. They kept doing this again and again and again and again, even though every single one was losing money. So we know that there had to be some other ulterior motive then behind just what would normally, because when we hear the word fair, World Fair, World Exposition, we think of like, I had one of those when I was a kid, right? When I grew up in Ottawa, there would be like, you would have like a concert. The Beach
Carnival
Boys would be
rides.
there, and you'd have some carnival rides, and you'd throw some balls at something, and
Yeah.
you'd eat some cotton candy, and yeah, that's what you think of as a fair.
Right.
But the shit like the Chicago Exposition is 700 acres. Now it does have this period of this area what they call the Midway, which we became known as our fair exposition of today. But it's still nothing like what we had. It's insane what was on that. But you add I think it was 15 to 17 giant buildings that are again supposedly just constructed. The largest of them could house 300,000 people. So you could put 300,000 people in one of the buildings, and each of them have towers and domes. And I mean, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, and you've got obviously you're on the internet right now while you're listening to this or watching this, just Google in, for example, Chicago Exposition 1893, St. Louis Exposition 1904, and pull up some photographs of what we're talking about. Because I think like the photographs are really, really important of what we're like the cover of my book. So that's the cover of the book. And people would think right away, well, you're showing a picture of Rome. No,
Mm-hmm.
that's Chicago of 1893. And this is like one tiny, tiny piece of a massive area in Chicago. So you had these 13 or 15 giant buildings. Every state in the union had its own building. Like again, giant, massive buildings. Then you have every country in the world, they built a building. You've got the canals, lakes. They had a moving train, an electric train. They had an electric sidewalk. Again, yeah, 1893. How do you have an electric
Well,
sidewalk and
how long
electric train? How do you?
supposedly did it take them to construct all of this? What time frame?
The story. This is again. So the mainframe story. Sorry, allergy. The mainstream story with this is the fair was awarded in early 1891. The fair was supposed to happen in 1892. The reason it was called, in this case, the Columbian Exposition was it was supposed to mark the anniversary of Christopher Columbus's landing in America. That's what it was supposed to do. So it's obviously a historical propaganda event, right? So unfortunately, it didn't. They weren't able to get it done just in time for 1890. They had an opening ceremony, but that wasn't actually built and start until 1893. So the actual time frame was about 2 years, 4 or 5 months, to at a time of no machines, right? No digging equipment. You're talking
Huh.
about less than just over 2 years to put up 700 acres of buildings. Now I'll go in two directions with that. The answer as to okay, if you try to ask a mainstream historian how did they do it, the answer will be is that they used a product known as staff, which is a very simplistic cement, and they are a cement like a very simplistic plaster, and they put the plaster up with basically wooden buildings. So you have a bunch of wooden halls and a bunch of plaster on top. Very simplistic, quick to build structures. That's what they try to tell you.
Yeah.
But as an example, in Buffalo in 1901, the electric tower, this gigantic tower there, was 235 feet high. Now, I don't know about, and what was it? I'm just showing getting a picture of it. The electrical tower in Buffalo, 235 feet
Wow.
high. It had an elevator inside of it that would take people to the top so that you could be on top and look out over the fair. Are you going to build a structure like that out of plaster and wood and
Right.
potentially have thousands of people crashing to their death at the middle of the fair? That's not a really good idea, especially when all the people who are coming to this are elites of your world. So just logically that didn't make sense, but that's the story. They try to claim it's a really simple material. Now, I don't dispute that there was a lot of simple, crude building material at these sites. There's no question. I can look at photographs, I can look at other things, and it's obvious. This is simple. This was done quickly. So I'm not saying they weren't built at all. They certainly were. The question is, was all of it really built, or was just parts of it built? I can get into what my building contractor said in a moment, but to me, it left me with two. I'll say this and I'll shut up. It left me with two main questions, and that was either A, this really was built in 2 years, but they must have had a building technology that they were not supposed to have and became, in a sense, lost to history, or two, they didn't actually build the whole site. A lot of it, particularly the big buildings, were already there. They basically just needed to clean them up, repaint them, and pretend they had built them. Um, those are the two logic. I mean, of course, you can go with illogical stuff with, they built this stuff in another dimension and they transported them here. Aliens built it. I mean, and trust me, everything is on the table. These things are so weird. Even though I kind of joke like that, I can't actually say for sure it's a joke, because literally, if you're honest about looking at this stuff, you have no idea how this was done.
Yeah, and I want to get to the possibilities of alternative historical timelines, false historical timelines, and all the possibilities surrounding that. You were just about to say something that your contractor said about the building
Oh
zone.
yeah. Right. So when I studied this stuff for about 3 or 4 weeks at the beginning, and we're just getting an overview and just realizing the depth of this, when I look into, here's the stuff in America, here's Milan, here's Paris, here's the stuff in Denmark, here's the ones that, holy crap, So I went to some building contractors that I know, guys that actually build giant sites. Like, they don't just build houses. Like, I mean, these are people that build, if you're building a bunch of apartment buildings, this is the guy you bring in. So I went to show him the pictures first. I didn't tell him what they were. I just showed him a bunch of pictures. And he said, "What is this?" I said, "That's the Chicago Exposition of 1893. What? So I explained to him what it was, and I told him, and I asked him, I showed him all the pictures. I told him how big it was, and I said, first of all, could you build this for me today? Like, is it possible that you could build this today? And he said, like, I've got all the machines I want and all the guys I want. I said, yeah, I mean, literally, I'm giving you like $1 billion budget. Could you build this? He said, yeah, I could build it for you. He said, here's what it roughly take. It's going to take me 2 years to do the planning, because we've got a whole lot of stuff you've got to go through with how you're going to landscape it, how you're going to build these lakes and canals and everything else. So that's about 2 years. Then give me 2 years, and I'll bring in the digging equipment, and we'll get the water system set up. We'll get that done. We'll get any water treatment stuff that's going through, and then give me anywhere from 12 to 15 years with, he said, 50,000 guys, and he said, I'll get this built for you. So I said, 15 years today to build this, and you could do it. He said, yeah. So I asked him, so in 1891, how did they build this in 2 years? His only answer was, well, it's not possible. So this is a guy who does this for a living every day of his life, and he says, the story as it's presented is actually, and
And the
he
mainstream
later on,
narrative
as we were
said
leaving, he said,
literally a few months they had this all constructed.
the mainstream narrative gives it. I'm trying to remember it all off the top of my head, so I might be a month or two off thing. But as I remember it now, they took the planning session of the two architects for this, who are also. It doesn't matter where you look in the story. The story of the architects are strange. The story of everybody is strange, but the planning for it is supposed to have taken 3 or 4 weeks. So he's telling you need 2 years to plan it. They planned the whole thing in 3 to 4 weeks, and they had and now remember, we're also building this in Chicago, where it gets really cold, really snowy, and you can't build during the winter anything, basically. So you also means, yeah, they're saying a little over 2 years, but you're chopping off, like, you're losing like 6 or 8 months because you can't build anything in Chicago. Oh, let's make it even more fun. The site they chose to build it on is a swamp. So they actually had to drive tens of thousands of wooden poles into the swamp to first create a base in which they're going to lay all the buildings on top of. Would you be putting buildings? Wait a minute. Now, again, I'll just, for everybody, because I want you to, would you put a building like that on top of a swamp? On top
Right.
of holding it in a swamp on wooden pilings? That's what they're trying to tell you the story is. And I think I actually got a picture in here of the wooden pilings. if I find it correctly for you, just so that I'm not making this up, that this is um no, I don't have a picture in here of the wooden piling, but again, you can look it up. So when you just consider that you only needed 3 weeks to plan this out when you've got one of the most difficult sites imaginable to build. Uh, and I love some of the responses you get. Yeah, but old world craftsmanship. You don't understand. In the 1800s, they knew how to build things.
Mm.
And I could say, okay, let's pretend that's true. Let's pretend that there were way different qualities of craftsmen who. But if you're going to build craft, like if I'm going to build an intricate table, like the kind of thing rich people, with the elites would have, with beautiful carvings and images and animals. That's going to take longer than building a regular table. It doesn't take shorter. So if you're going to extravagance, the building process, even with experts, should take longer, not like it is here, taking shorter. So everything just on that aspect becomes really bizarre with the fairs.
So across the board, even all over the planet, they had similar types of technology and construction displayed.
Right. Yeah, the same. Again, if you just pump in these things, world fairs, and throw in Paris, yeah, they were everywhere. Copenhagen, Stockholm, like I say, the Philippines. There was some really strange ones in Rio de Janeiro, in South America, in Panama, and like in East Asia. Australia, that's another good one. They had these giant things. There's no people in Australia, basically, right? There's nobody there, and they're building these massive exposition halls. And again, it's like, well, first of all, where are they even getting the materials from? Where are they getting the materials from? And you can say, well, okay, they're moving them in by train. Okay, that's fine. Here's another thing my building contractor had a ton of fun with. I showed him the construction photos of 1904 in St. Louis, because St. Louis is the fair with the most supposed construction photos. What's bizarre about St. Louis is you'll get the construction photo will be a completed building in like a mud plain field. So the building's done, except maybe there's something being done on the roof. There's scaffolding all over the place, and that's all there is. It's like there's nothing in the midst of being completed. It's a building completed with scaffolding. He looked at the photo and he said, I don't know what the hell's going on here, but where is the bathrooms? You've got like 40 or 50,000 guys. Where are the guys going to the bathroom? I don't see any coffee cups on the ground. I don't see any sandwich wrappers. He said, I don't see a stack of wood next to the building where you're building. Just to build these scaffolds, you're going to need like piles of wood to be able to build the scaffolding. He just looked and said, I don't know what this is, but nobody's been building here for like a year. Huh. And this is supposedly right in the midst of the construction period. So it was really, I was confused by what I was seeing, but it wasn't until I had these conversations with the building contractors that then I felt I'm on the right track, because their expertise in this field could fill in the gaps for me not having true building knowledge to be able to say they themselves can't explain what's going on. And that was when I took the book seriously. And that's when I sort of moved into this deeper research phase on it.
They were also displaying technology that seemed to be way further ahead than should have been available at the time, right?
Yeah, you've got, so if we go into what's at the fair, because actually, generally, mostly when this topic comes up, because there have been a lot of people who've talked about this topic over the last 6 or 7 years, the buildings tend to get the most focus, just like, because it's the thing you see first. But yeah, what's actually going on at the fair, what they're actually displaying, what they're actually doing there is even more bizarre than the buildings, imaginally. So we've got, just to give you, before we can get into that, just to give you an idea of how strange these fairs are. So Chicago, I'm assuming, obviously you're from the United States.
Yeah.
You've said the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm sure, since you were a young child. When did the Pledge of Allegiance first start? Do you know?
I am not aware. No.
It started for the opening of the Columbian Exposition in Chicago. It was written specifically for that, and it was said by like 100 children at the opening ceremony.
Right on. Interesting.
So again, as you dig into the fairs and what's going on there, so many pieces of what became our heritage
Hmm.
literally come out of the fairs. So for me, I began to see that why I started calling them. This was the end of the last reset. These fair, like, why are they all over the world? Why do they look the same? Why are they showing the same stuff? Well, if you, in a sense, have a wiped out population and you're repopulating the world, and you want to, how would I describe it? You want to get the world population thinking the same way in a time before television, before movies, before the internet, before this is the kind of thing you would do. You would set up almost like a giant traveling circus that would go around the world, that would be presenting what you want to present, particularly to the elites of your community. Like, guaranteed, all the school teachers will be at this thing, all the university professors will be at these things. And now they go back and explain to their students what they saw, what they did there. And lo and behold, it would not take long for a few generations, because once I start sharing what's at these fairs, you can see that how this could be used as a propaganda tool.
Hmm.
It's
Now
yeah,
this time frame also ties into what people know as the orphan trains, right?
right. Yeah, so you've got, so again, these are all things I really didn't know much about. Um, so this period, this 1860s to 1900s, we've got three really strange events happening in the United States. One of which are orphan trains, a second of which is the building of mental asylums, and the third is city fires. So, orphan trains is, for some reason, in the 1880s, no one can explain. It just seems like there's just children everywhere, right? You just get photos of children in cities with no adults, nothing, and no one can
Yeah.
explain why there's so many children, why there's so many
They're
orphans.
all
They
working
were literally
in
pumping them on.
mines and stuff.
Yeah, and of course they try to present it like, oh, it's because it's cheap labor and they're using the well, even if it was cheap labor, you would not want a 7-year-old digging coal out of the ground, because it's just, even still, it's not effective to be wasting space when you could get like a 25-year-old guy and do the digging for you. Obviously they didn't have any adults. They had
Huh.
only children, and the question is, well, why? Where were all the adults? First of all, what happened to them all? And of course, that would make sense if you're thinking of resetting your population. You want to reset mentally children, because children will have no deeper experience. They'll have no understanding of anything prior. And particularly if they're coming out of trauma, they will be unbelievably grateful for the few adults or whatever who are caring for them and are looking after them, and they'll believe whatever they're told. So they're the
Hmm.
perfect indoctrination tool to start with. So you've got that going on, these bizarre orphan trains all over, and not just in the United States. It's just happening all over the world, that these orphans are. You could actually get this. You could at the time order an orphan through the US mail service. I kid you not. The postman would actually deliver an orphan
What?
to your door. Yeah.
That's
How
insane.
screwed up is that? So you've got that going on. Now we've got, at the same time, we've got insane asylums being built. And again, if watching this, go type in insane asylums like 1880s, 1890s. The buildings are massive, first of all. Like, they're bigger than the Medici palaces of Florence. They are more opulent. They're more beautiful than them. First of all, why do you need so many insane asylums all the time? And second of all, why do you need to make them look like Buckingham Palace? Where are all these insane people coming from? Now, this would
Interesting.
make sense if you're dealing with a reset and you've got a whole bunch of people who are just not wanting to go along with the new narrative, who are not
Mm.
wanting to forget, hey, wait a minute, this is how life is supposed to be in this world, in this place, and I'm not buying this garbage. Well, you know what? You're going to go in this building and you're just going to stay there until you agree with what we're telling you to agree with.
That has
So that,
eerie connections to some of the things we're seeing right now in our reality, but
right.
that we'll get to that later.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, this is so that's why to me it was, there's such a connection. So that's the second thing. The third thing that's going on at this time period is city fires,
Hmm.
particularly in the United States. Every single city goes through a fire that literally burns the city to the ground and then magically rebuilds, just like the fairs, magically rebuilds in a year or two. Like, literally in one year, the whole city is back, and it's like the fire never happened. Now, to me, they try to explain this that they're over like 100-year time period and it's just coincidental because of wooden buildings and whatnot. But what if the time frame of the fires wasn't 100 years? What if it was really like 2 years? That would tell us right away something else was going on other than just coincidental fires. And maybe they had to make it over a 100-year period. Otherwise, people would ask questions that they're not supposed to ask. So you've got those three things happening. The fourth thing that's happening is the western part of the United States is going under rapid development, supposedly. And example, we can get into like the city of San Francisco, which to me is like a historical smoking gun because there's supposed to be nothing in San Francisco in 1847, right? The US, in a sense, captures it from the Spanish or the Mexicans or whatever. And within 20 years, I can again show you some photographs of a city that's just literally looking like downtown Prague, and you're like, well, how is a bunch of miners and cowboys able to do this in 30 years? And this is happening in Salt Lake City. It's happening like everywhere in the West. You're having these explosions of these. Same thing with state capitol buildings. This is another great thing that particularly Americans in the western part of the country can go do is like go to see your state capitol building in Iowa or Oklahoma or Nebraska. Like the thing is going to be giant. And just think of the dome. This is being built in like 1840, like when there's no people living here. Like, first of all, why do you need this in 1840? And secondly, how did they even build it? How in the middle of how in the middle of like Nebraska did they get all this stuff to even build this? And where do they get the people to know how to build it? So you've got all this happening at the same time. And then you've got these goofy world fairs happening all over the place. Again, it's an indication something different is going on than the historical narrative tried to tell us.
When we're talking about the resets, there's also possible evidence of a rapid cataclysm that could have wiped out a large portion of the population and left remnants behind. And some of the evidence that some cite is the buildings that seem to have been buried by mud, right?
Yeah, that's one of the theories that comes from this is that we're talking the possibility of that these buildings were not built when they were said they were. These buildings were not built in the 1800s. They're ancient. They're hundreds. They're thousands of years old. Even part of a civilization similar to Greece and Rome that extended all over the world. That there wasn't like a Roman period and a Greek period. It's like one giant world period that the same buildings were built everywhere. And then what happened to the people or what happened to everything? One answer is a certain group or a certain area or a certain group of beings or whatever decided to wipe out humans and start again. And others that, yes, this happened by some sort of cataclysm. It's just certain, we'll call them elite control type people, had the calendar or had the knowledge of exactly when this was going to happen. So they could, in a sense, put themselves in a safe place during the period of a worldwide cataclysm. They just wait a year, come back out because we have all these stories of people living underground and then coming back up, or you have the weird places like Cappadocia in Turkey, which makes no sense of why are there tens of thousands of people living in these massive cities under the ground. And so this is one of the theories. And if you look into the period around 1812 to 1818, which is another period of history that's just bizarre, but you've got all these comets and the Mississippi River flowed the other way for a while. Like, think about that. The Mississippi River turned its flow around 1816 or 1817. Again, no one really has a proper explanation. Exactly. And no one can actually truly explain how and why that happened. Now you're turning into, cataclysmic events, pole shift on the Earth, some sort of comet range. If you don't
maybe
believe
something
in outer
intentional,
space,
human caused, possibly.
You have something human caused. You have something. You have like another one to think about is the book by H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds, came out in 1895. Right, the story of an alien attack on Earth. And now some people who've gone into this start to wonder: is he writing a fictional book or is he writing a documentary?
Interesting.
So, not that I'm saying they're aliens from other planets, but that could mean there are beings there's certainly beings from other dimensions, let's put it that way, who have certainly been fighting for control over this realm for a long time. And that just might have been a period when one over the other decided to scorch this place and impart their control a little differently.
Mm.
But we can, yeah, talk about the various possibilities of resets. But the problem is all of this is sort of bunched into the same time period. Another one that's really interesting to think about too for all of you is if you look at the period 1850 to about 1900 and you look at inventions that are invented, almost everything in our modern world, whether it's the way the banking system works, the way government works, things you use, literally everything from cars to airplanes, it all has its origin in this like 40 or 50-year time frame. There's almost nothing that really truly
Mm.
goes back further than that. It's like
Right.
everything was magically somehow started in this 40 or 50-year period around photography, like it doesn't matter. Like every single thing you look at links to this little time period. And again, that something tells you that's strange. That's
Mm.
again, so everything about this time in history is that way it's presented to us, if you honestly examine it, doesn't make any sense.
Now, skeptics would say that that's a lot of history to rewrite and a lot of books and a lot of
Mhm.
content to put out in such a very short amount of time, just like the phenomena of putting up the buildings in such a short amount of time. So, which one is the actual truth that we can look at, right?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a theory, but again, like everything I'm sharing with you today, even if I'm trying to say it could be this, it could be that, it's a
Hmm.
theory.
Right.
I mean, no, that's a problem. Like you say, nobody can actually know for sure.
Hmm.
I don't have a time machine. I can't go back there myself and look. All we can do is take the narrative, the way the world presents it to us, and says this is what you're supposed to believe, and we can examine the narrative in detail, especially this time period because we have photographs. Thankfully, before Chat GPT starts making them all for us, but
Yeah.
we at least have some original photographs, and we can. Those are helpful to get us to destroy them. Like I can tear down the narrative, but I can't put a new narrative in its place. But I'll give you an example. What if the reset actually happened in, yeah, let's say 1812. Let's throw that as the real date. Or does it mean about 1820? Let's throw that date as a nice number. So 1820, the whole earth gets scorched. But they wait 50 to 70 to 100 years to feel that everything is in place that they need to do, from getting things set up to getting the population the way they want it, to having the history set up the way they want, removing books that they don't want, adding books that they want, getting the technology used, not used, hidden, and then they say, okay, now it's been 50 years, we're ready. So the reset happened on like April 1st, 1920. They wait 50 years. The next day then is now April 2nd, 1920. You've just lost the 50-year period where literally they made sure nothing happened, and you just repump out newspapers on April 2nd, just like nothing has happened, but 50 years have just been lost, which would make sense of how all sorts of stuff could happen, all sorts of things could be maneuvered, put around, put in place, planned out, without anybody ever knowing it happened. Right? Fomenko says one thing. This Russian guy. He talks about they took out 1,000 years from the calendar, in the Middle Ages, to try to hide when the Jesus story really happened. And then I think that could be true, but I think they also did the opposite. They stopped years for a while in
Mm.
order to hide what had really happened, before, sort of sense, restarting time for
Right.
people.
Now, based on everything you've studied and all the research and the evidence that we do have, what do you think our world might have been like before this reset? Do you think it might have been a global type of Roman Empire?
Well, at least the buildings are there. And one of the questions I get asked a lot about this is, well, what do the native Indians have to say? Because if like the equivalent of ancient Rome was existing in the United States, first of all, were they the native Indians? And after the reset, they all got, blown out of their cities, and that's why they're actually living on the plains and hunting buffalo. It's not That was not a choice of theirs. It was they were truly in a survival mode because their homes were these really their homes. But why don't they have if that's true, that should be in their mythology. That should be in their stories. And unfortunately, I don't live in North America anymore. And the native medicine men who were my teachers 25 years ago in the reserves are dead now. I think maybe, or one is, it's about 80 or 85. And I don't have access to, like, I wished I knew this like 25 years ago when I was in the sweat lodges with them, because I would have asked them. I would have said, I've got through this research, I've got through this information. Is there anything like that in your in
Yeah,
your
yeah.
heritage? So if somebody does have close connections to native reserves and to some native certainly native what you would call wisdom keepers, this is something to bring up. So what was it like? See, this is so hard because some people then try to romanticize the past too much. I got caught in that when I was writing my Egypt books, that I kind of put ancient Egypt on a pedestal without truly have. Now, obviously, they had more wisdom than we ever could believe. They had more knowledge than they could believe, more scientific ability, more understanding of mathematics and geometry and frequency and sound and connection with the earth. But that doesn't necessarily mean everything they were doing was good and dandy, too. That it still might have been a type of control mechanism, just a different kind of control then. But certainly, one thing that stands out is the type of architecture that these kind of buildings, represent. Like a building like, sorry, just flipping through my book, like the old courthouse of Chicago, right? That used to be the courthouse of Chicago. Like, now, of course, you wouldn't want something like that today. That's just too nice. But something like that is, as I've come to understand it, is generating energy. It literally is producing a type of, and I don't even want to say energy like we know it. It's like different layers of energy. These buildings are bringing in energy from the sky and the earth. They're circulating it and projecting it out to the city. So I get a sense that one of the things these buildings were doing was naturally harmonizing the area. Because like there's some cathedrals in Europe that are just eerie. Like I go in them and my skin crawls. But generally, most of them, it's like they're still working properly. And there are buildings there where it doesn't matter how sick I think I might be, or if I'm exhausted or I'm tired. I just go into this one cathedral. I sit there for like 20 minutes and I'm absolutely refreshed, healthy, ready to go. And I realized that when these things were operating on full bore, because the way I'll give you an example, there was one in Nantes, France. And when I went in, I was able to notice the energy was coming straight. There's a giant tower in the middle of it. And the energy would come in the tower, and I could feel the energy would circulate. There's like a central area of a church, right? That has like the cross part of it, but there's always like I guess that's the nave, but there's like an outside area that's kind of outside a bunch of columns and pillars. I can't remember the name for the sides of a church, but I could feel the energy that comes down would circulate in the outside there. It wasn't going up and down. It was circulating around that outside. At the back, of course, of every church is an organ. Then these organs are massive. And in fact, why are they called organs? Well, they're playing music that resonates with the human organ, right? With the human organs of the body. So once you would play the organ music, the organ would then impact its sound on the circulating energy, and that would be projected to the rose windows. And if you look at every rose window in a church and you understand cymatics, which is the patterns that sound makes when you project it onto sand or onto water, right? Certain sounds and certain vibrations will can make particular patterns. So what they're doing is they're taking that energy and they're projecting it through these specific cymatic patterns, roses, but they're not roses. They're literally energy creating frequencies, and that would be projected to the entire city. And of course, these big cities would have 10, 15, 20 of these things that are constantly projecting this energy out on the city. So I wouldn't be surprised if, at the very least, living in one of these areas would be much different today, because the buildings in the city themselves would be creating a much more harmonious, balanced life force, as opposed to today, where the cities tend to literally drain us and suck the energy out of us by the way they're built and how they're structured and what they do. So what everybody was doing with the energy, how nice or wonderful or not, I don't know, but certainly the potential of a much more healthy, balanced population was there with these old buildings.
That's so interesting. I remember I grew up Catholic, and most of the churches I would go to growing up would give me a very creeped out vibe, but they had this one beautiful cathedral that was a few miles from my hometown that we'd go to occasionally with my family for, Christmas gatherings and things like that. But this place was so different, had such a different type of energy, and they did have one of those big organs there and the huge stained glass windows, and I couldn't wait to go there every time. I normally hated going to church, but for this particular place, I was always excited to go to.
And it would have been interesting to remember, like, if you could, if you had diaries or something, like, did you ever go there feeling like, you had a pain in your back or you hurt your knee playing football the day before, and then you walk out and, hey, my knee's fine.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting if you had those kind, because I don't doubt that would be, I don't think they needed hospitals 500 years ago. I think if people were sick or had problems, they could just send them to these cathedrals, and the cathedral would heal them. Yeah.
I want to get back to the types of technology that we could be looking at. It's not the type of technology that we are used to today. It'd be a much more frequency-based type or an energetic-based type of technology, right?
Right. So we've got the two things to talk about when we get back to the fair. So one is the technology and one is the exhibits. So technology, the best place to look for the weirdness of the technology is electricity. So the exposition in Chicago had more electric light bulbs at it than the entire city of New York at the time. And they had one building supposedly supplying all of the electricity for the Chicago exposition, which makes no sense because a huge portion of that building was just technological exhibits showing the newest light bulb this, the newest train car that, the newest whatever, right? So how are they generating all this power? And remember, they've got a moving walkway. They've got an electric train. Where is the electricity coming from? In Buffalo, the story was that Nikola Tesla, whether he's a real person or not, I don't know, but he's claimed anyway to be the one to always win the electricity contracts over Thomas Edison, which supposedly pissed Edison off always. But Tesla supposedly got the one in Buffalo and was claimed to have put water turbines into Niagara Falls, because Buffalo, again, same thing. It had more electric lights than any city in the U.S. for the Buffalo Exposition of 1901. So we've got this first problem of where's all the electricity coming from, really? How are they generating it? So weird about Buffalo, because that's where McKinley gets. Actually, Buffalo is the stupidest, weirdest World Fair ever. But President McKinley gets assassinated at the Buffalo World Fair, and they took him to the operating room. In the operating room they took him to was a bit dark. It didn't have any windows in it, and they had no electric lights. So they had to go outside with mirrors and shine and take use the sun, reflect the sun off a mirror so they could get some light in so that they could try to save McKinley's life. Meanwhile, there's 100,000 light bulbs all over the rest of the fair, but they didn't think of putting one in the operating room where you might actually need one. What? It's just everything about these stories is just nuts. So the technology itself is it's overboard for the time frame, and it doesn't make any sense as to why they would have so much of it when you can't really explain even where they're getting the electricity from.
When you look at the technology that we have today, the developments that we have are nothing that benefits humanity in any way, as far as getting us free energy, as far as helping enriching our lives and our health care. And this technology that you're speaking of seemed to do this very thing.
Yeah, I don't doubt this was the last round of them using. I don't doubt the buildings at these fairs generated the energy themselves. The towers, the domes, the whatever, they were the ones generating the energy, and it was still functioning like it used to, like a true free energy place. But they were presenting, and again, this is what these world fairs are doing. We're talking about all the different things and why they're so important. They're presenting a story to the populations of the world that they're going to believe going forward. One of them is energy is difficult to produce. It costs a lot of money, and therefore you have to pay us for us to give you this energy that you're going to need to grow. But it's important because it's going to revolutionize the industrial age. Electricity is important, but they don't want to let you know. But you know what? It's been free forever, basically.
Mm.
And if you know how to do it, you just make it yourself. It's there. It's out. It's in the atmosphere. But now we want you to start believing. But you need us to give it to you, or you don't have any. So to me, the fairs were still operating in the old style, but they were telling everybody, "Oh no, we're doing it this new way, or the only way of producing energy through turbines, through machines, through coal, through wind and whatever." But not letting people know that all these buildings were going to blow up and tear down after this. Yeah,
Mm.
they were the ones actually doing it. And so I think that's one of the things we're seeing is you're presenting. They were in a sense showing in the face. Here's the way things used to be technologically wise. Now we're going to destroy it all, and we're going to tell you
Interesting.
what the technology is going forward, and there'll be no memory of the past of how things used to be. So that's one part I think what the fairs are doing in the technology
Mm.
side.
Now, what about the exhibits? What other type of exhibits were we looking at?
So you've got exhibits on everything from art to clothing to, I mean, you name it, there's an exhibit for it. If you were curious on what kind of beers were Germany making this year, I guarantee you there would be like 1,000 beers somewhere at the World Fair. You could go and look at them. But the two areas that we should talk about here that are the most important are the human zoos and the historical
Mm.
exhibits. So the human zoos, these are what they did is they would actually bring what they call primitive tribes from all over the world. So you would get, Zulus from Africa. They would get Pygmies. They would get
Wow.
Eskimos. They would bring Cheyenne. They would bring Arapaho, and they would set up gigantic enclosures and
No.
show them off and make them as primitive as possible in order to show people, look at what you evolved from.
What?
Look at the low level of human it used to be. And they would do things to play that off. In Buffalo, they made the Indians that were there go to the Coliseum. There was 5,000 people to watch this. They brought in 800 dogs. The Indians were forced to kill them and then eat them in the
Gee.
Coliseum.
Oh my God. That's
Yeah, this is the
insane.
kind of stuff that's going on. Another amazing thing that was going on, the Smithsonian Institute, I think they started up the first exhibit in Nashville, I think. They would have an exhibit of skulls, and they would show these small deformed skulls, and they would say pygmy from Africa. They would say, Aboriginal from Australia. They'd have criminal here, and then they would have this one giant skull. They would say British Victorian 1885. And then they would have these things that they would measure your skull, and then they would take your measurement and put them towards all the other skulls to show how far you were along in the process of the
Oh my
evolutionary
God.
development. Were you like the criminal and the primitive, or were you like the British elite Victorian? This is what's
Wow.
going on at these world fairs in the human zoo department. And I'm simplifying it. They also would have exhibit. This is also incredible, called the Old Plantation. I'm going to read you exactly what the newspaper. So this Old Plantation, if we had to simplify what they're doing at it, they were trying to show that things in the slave period for the slaves were actually pretty great and wonderful. So here is the exhibit that the way the Buffalo Evening News suggested people should go to the old plantation. Genuine Southern darkies, 200 of them ranging in years from wee toddling pickaninnies to Negroes gray and bent with age, can be seen each day at the exposition in their different occupations and
Oh my
pastimes.
God.
Lovers of Negro melodies will have a feast. Many of the darkies will be selected because of their special talents as singers and banjo players, and they will dance and sing to the seductive tinklings of instruments exactly as the Negroes of the South used to do a long, long time ago.
Oh my God. That is one of the most horrible
This,
things I've ever heard.
yeah, and I could in this area I could go on for like 2 or 3 hours going through exactly what these each one of these fairs were doing and how they were doing it in this
Jeez.
field. So it's all about the idea of evolution was being pushed very, very hard at these fairs, that
Hmm.
this is something that must be believed, that everything is moving forward, and you at this moment in time must be the most advanced thing ever. Therefore, we must show that everything that came before you is primitive, useless, and in fact, because you're still at the point of these fairs of they're killing off the Indians on the plains. right? There's still a war going on to decimate the Native Americans, and they need to make sure that they, in a sense, are presenting primitive, savage, need to be destroyed. They want this in the so the fairs are also producing this idea of like, not only do we need the land, we need to kill these people off in order to make it right for us evolved, of course, in this case, British Victorians, right? So this is one part of what's going on at the fairs, a gigantic propaganda machine of false humanity, basically, is the best way of describing it.
That is absolutely...
So that's one side of it.
Yeah. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and like I said,
go ahead.
Yeah. And I think, to me, these are so many things that need to be presented about the fairs. This is why when somebody just does a 15-minute little YouTube video on showing some buildings and stuff, and look at this building, and I'm like, the buildings are nothing. You need to do the research to know what's going on at these things. That's what's important. To me, even bigger than the zoos is what I call the historical exhibits. The reason I say that is if my thesis is true, and there was a reset, and the world, in a sense, was decimated, the population killed off, and the history needs to be eliminated, you have to build a new history now. You have to get something that people are going to believe. This is the St. Louis World Fair, 1904, that I'm reading. This is not the complete area of the historical Midway, but I want you to just read, this is what you could have seen if you went to the St. Louis Exposition. You think Disneyland has something to show you? Here we go. Ancient Rome was a colossal exhibit with over 400 actors employed to give the visitor the illusion of going back in time to the life of the gladiators. A large arena called the Hippodrome showcased chariot races, jousting, boxing, and gladiatorial clashes with including 200 animals, including tigers, lions, and leopards. The finale was a reproduction of Nero's Rome burning. The Tyrolean Alps was a 9-acre reproduction of the Alpine region in Bavaria, Germany. It had 21 village cottages, a cathedral, and gigantic mountains of staff. Visitors could ride a simulated train car through the Alps where the real cattle and real goats would be in pasture. Jerusalem covered 11 acres, and included 22 streets and 300 buildings. Replicated were the stable in which Jesus Christ was said to be born, the Golden Gate, the Mosque of Omar. Over 1,000 people from Jerusalem traveled to the United States to participate and work in the exhibit. Like Chicago, one could walk down the streets of Cairo and smoke a water pump, ride a camel, haggle for carpets, or walk through a replica of Luxor Temple. At the streets of Seville, one saw a replica of the Plaza de Toros in Madrid. The Great Siberian was a train ride that utilized illusion to make one believe they were on the cross-country Russian railway. The Irish Village was entered by a replica of St. Lawrence's Gate. Paris replicated France during medieval times. There was Constantinople, the Chinese village, and the streets of Old St. Louis. They're presenting history on such a massive scale with tens of thousands of actors. It's one thing to go and read a book on something. It's another thing to see a lecture. It's very, very manipulative to present history with actors interacting with you and talking to you, tricking you into thinking you're actually there. And I mean, the average person, if they went to watch the gladiator clashes at the St. Louis Exposition and then talk to the gladiators afterwards, they would think, I know everything about ancient Rome now. I know all about the gladiators. I know all about the Roman Colosseum. I was there. The scale of this is mine. Just the Jerusalem exhibit, 22 streets, 300 buildings, was built for one exhibit.
And at the end, they blew everything up, right? They just destroyed it all at the end.
Everything at the St. Louis Fair is a good example. They brought in dynamite experts from Chicago and blew it all up, and they claim threw it into a bunch of landfills. Now, I would like to know where those landfills are, and I'd like to go dig them up. Because if it's true that it was all built out of staff and wood, then there's going to be nothing in those landfills. It's all going to have been, just decayed. If it's what I think it is, and a large amount of marble and fine stone and granite, then it's still going to be in those landfills. So I would love, but yeah, they blew all of them up. Now they would always keep one building. This is the bizarre thing. They would always say, "Oh, we had to make one building real. We had to build one building out of marble and granite." That's because there was special artworks from around the world that needed to be fire protected. So we need all the other stuff. No, that doesn't need to be fire protected, but just these few pieces of artwork. And so, well, we keep this one building. It'll always be an art gallery now, a history museum, whatever. So St. Louis has one, right? Chicago has one, Buffalo has one, San Francisco has one. They all have this. It's the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco, in case you're curious. But there's always this one building that they had to build for real in order to, as opposed to what, if anybody looks into how the Church of Rome took over Europe, which was destroy the old pagan sites, specifically the stone circles and the standing stones and everything else. And they would build their cathedral, their new church, on top of wherever they had just taken over. But they would always leave one stone. There will always be one. That's how I can track because I track stone circles now through Norway and Sweden where I live. And I found hundreds of them. A lot of the time, just by going to an old cathedral, old church. They call them Stavkirkas here. And then you'll find one old stone of the original, and then I can just start tracking, and I bump into stone circles nobody knows about. So it's kind of a similar thing. You're destroying a whole thing, but you keep one, kind of like a weird souvenir, kind of like a weird ceremonial marker for what went on there. So I don't for a minute believe they only made one real building, and the whole rest of the thing was some sort of quick giant, no, that's definitely not the case.
For the last few minutes we have, let's get into the possibility of a cyclical type of event or cataclysm that we may be headed towards again. Like we were talking about earlier, it's possible that the elites of the time knew that these cyclical type of cataclysms occur and that we were headed towards a new one. And not only were they prepared, but they facilitated a brand new reality after this cataclysm occurred. Fast forward to today, we're already seeing the rewriting of our history before anything happens. So could it be that we are indeed headed towards another massive cataclysm and the elites of today are trying to get ahead of it all?
I think it's even bigger than that. I think what we call resets in the past, which no question there were. And of course, we can get into the whole simulation theory and how old is the simulation actually. I could even say the simulation started with the World's Fairs in 1851, that literally nothing is truly real until they turned the switch on. It began a simulation. But a lot of my new book, Exit the Cave, which is all about Plato's cave and the dealing with, in a sense, getting out of the matrix. When I look at where we're at now, I actually think we're at a different place. I think the simulation that we are in is ending. And those that have been put in the control positions know that it's ending. And what they're doing is they're not as so much shaping a new narrative for here. They're building the new simulation that they're going to put, that they're going to move humans, you might say, into one that is, very transhumanist, very robotic, it'll be very different from this world we're in now. And actually, we're in a really good period. Good in that the one simulation is ending, the new one hasn't started yet. We're in this bridge point between them. That means we have the opportunity to gather our own inner power, our own knowledge, our own totality, and if we're ready for it, leave the simulations completely. We can choose to, because we're not as tethered to one, because we're a little bit out of that one. We're not in the new one yet. We have a great opportunity to see through everything, to see the actual falseness of all we've been around, of all the things we've been told, of all the systems that we're dealing with, and have the opportunity to actually go, you might say, return home. So so to me, this is why this is such an amazing period, that when I begin to see that the fairs or the period of these old resets are like a minor version of we're actually in the big one now. We're in like the true reset. I see three things that are going to happen. One, we've got the reset, the simulation ends and the new one starts, and everyone who goes into the new simulation, ain't gonna like that in the least. It's gonna be you're gonna be another level deeper in the matrix. Some will be able to escape. Some will, a large number, I think, of human souls will um, understand what they have to do and navigate their way out of this place completely. A third thing that has highly happened, I forget to mention sometimes, is that this entire simulation will not just no, it doesn't end exactly. It'll reloop itself, and we'll go back like in a giant, like a Groundhog Day, and go back and have a giant time loop experience of whether it's 100 years, 500 years, 3,000 years, whatever. But there will be a massive time loop, and we'll be living through all of this shit again.
Mm.
So two of the three scenarios are not really good ones.
Now, I know we got into this last time you were on, but to give the audience an idea, do you think that this simulation is something that is created for us, or is it something that's been hijacked by nefarious intelligences or entities, and we have the opportunity now to either exit this false overlay or reclaim our type of simulation? What do you think about that?
I know some see it that way, but I've come to see it as the simulation has only been made to harvest our energy. It's only been made to be an insane realm. It's been always insane, but just different levels, different ways, presented differently. It's been one giant trick and deception from the beginning. And there's multiple layers, multiple simulations. Plato's cave is vast, right? It's this realm, the etheric realm, the astral realm, the heavenly realm. I mean, everything that is potentially experienceable is within Plato's cave. It's within the matrix. So to me, the truly great deep visioning is I've become more like a Gnostic or a Cathar. And again, this whole thesis again is, it's a thesis. It's my way of seeing reality now after 30 years. But I see that the greatest thing one can do, in a sense, is just like in that War Games movie, the best move you can make is not to play, to not be a part of this, to not be a part of the very thing that's really tricking and trapping and deceiving us and stealing our energy, and just decide, I'm not interested in this anymore, and I'm leaving. I'm going to go back home. Not by meaning I'm going to try to kill myself and get out of here, because that's not going to work either. So many people think, well, if I just commit suicide, I won't be here anymore, and I'll be free. No, you'll be in the astral realm, and now you're going to deal with the beings that are there, who are going to trick you and get you back into the simulation again, and maybe something way worse than you have now. So even if this is difficult, even if it's traumatic, because I've gone through a lot of trauma in my life, but the key point is I'm using the time I have here to learn, to experience, to test reality, to learn more about myself, to learn more of my own inner power, to learn more about how reality is structured, so that I can navigate all the tricks and deceptions, and you might say make the only journey we ever have to make. So for me, it's disengage from this place as much as possible, while still obviously drinking water and eating food and being good to your friends and treating animals and nature as well as you can. But at the same time, the main focus is seeing what this place really is, and saying, okay, I don't want to be a part of another reset. I don't want to be a part of another simulation. I don't want to be a part of another bunch of tricks and lies and whatever. It's just like, but I'm greater than all of that. I have more power than all of that. I'm actually, I'm like, I'm the totality. So why not choose just to go back to that totality, to ultimate freedom, and this place can then do what it wants.
Do you think that there's ultimately some sort of force that is causing this advancement in awareness in people on a large scale? Do you think that there is some kind of force that is causing this large awakening in people?
No, and I wouldn't say there's that large of an awakening. Actually, there's been a lot of people who have been personally um, personally seen more insanity. It's been more obvious now, or have been personally highly inconvenienced. Their comfort level has no longer been able to stay as comfortable. They've been pushed, and so because of that, a lot of people have seen things are not right here. There's something wrong with everything. They're not saying just the last few years. They're realizing, hell, for the last 500 years, it's been wrong here. So people have come to that point. But I think to actually start to step back and see, wait a minute, the whole thing is a constructed prison, because the belief has always been, right, that a loving God made this place to care about me, and it's a school, and I'm here to learn, and I'm here to grow, and we take that. I took that for granted when I got that kind of information as a 4 or 5 year old. But how do you test it? How do you test that to prove that it's true or not? Because, like I said, the Gnostics and the Cathars have a completely different story, right? They believe that there is a truly total force out there, but that creature or being or whatever had nothing to do with this reality. This was made by an evil God who tricked us in here to, in a sense, use our energy. So that's not to say one is definitely true, one is not true. The question becomes for each of us is, how can we look into these possibilities and find out what we think is true from our own experience and our own research? We just get fed something at 4 years old and are told this is what you're supposed to believe, and we never really figure out a proof for it. And I guess I've gone now to the far edge of that and just said, I'm looking for the proofs of every one of these possible creation stories. And unfortunately, the ones that are the place is not built to make us happy and wonderful tend to win out in the logic category.
Right on. I love this. Really gets my wheels turning. Howdie, thank you so much. This was fantastic. Yet again, before you head out,
Yeah.
let the audience know where they can find all your work.
I've still got a website going called Egyptian-wisdom-revealed.com. I'm moving to a new site with, I think it'll be howdymickoski.com. So you'll be redirected at some point if you go to the old one to the new site. I still got a lot of stuff up on YouTube. I'm not really posting there anymore, but there's 3 years worth of stuff that you can find there. I'm posting my new stuff now on a locals channel. If you can find me through my name on locals, I'm putting up a lot of it's for free. Some of it is, you have to pay a couple dollars a month, but a large amount of it's still for free over there. And of course, you can find all my books from the expositions to the Exit the Cave. You can start on a place like my website or Amazon. Don't have to buy the books on Amazon, but you can at least get an overview of them there, and then you can go buy them wherever the heck you might want. And yeah, that's where I can be found. And again, it's just a reminder that I'm just sharing the 30 years or so of my work in this subject and the research, and importantly, the experiences that I've had. Not so much because I want you to believe them, but I want you to take the possibility of other things you've never thought about, and just to give it some time and say, well, could something like that be true? Could a different viewpoint than I've always had in my life be correct? Could history and other things not be telling me a true narrative? And allow yourself to do some research for yourself. And again, the only thing that matters is the truth that you're going to find within yourself. So
Excellent. Very well said. Howdy, thank you so much. We'll do it again soon. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow, and we'll see y'all then.